Have you ever wondered what happens when the person the world calls a failure is actually the only one capable of saving everyone? My name is Emily Carver, and for years my family treated me like a shadow, someone worthless, the daughter who never got where she was supposed to be. But on that autumn night, amidst fake smiles and applause that was never meant for me, a secret that had been kept for years exploded right in the middle of my own home. What would you do if all of a sudden your whole truth came out in front of the people who doubted you the most? Before I explain how everything turned upside down, you need to understand what my life was like up until then. Growing up in a military home, you learn not to raise your voice, even to ask for help. At first, it seemed like following the rules was what kept us together. A fixed wake-up time, 5:10 in the morning, coffee ready in 15 minutes, uniform folded on the hallway chair, shoes lined up as if someone was going to inspect them. My father, Richard Hayes, never tolerated tardiness or mistakes, and my mother, Margaret, had a schedule on duty at Fort Bragg Air Force Base, working double shifts when I was 7 and again when I was 13. She would walk through the door when the sky was still black, leaving sticky notes on the refrigerator with schedules and reminders. Bed made by 6, teeth brushed, coffee at 6:15. There was no room for doubt or questions, only execution. Ava, my sister who was 2 years younger, always fit the mold. She won a silver medal in the cadet competition in 2008, was valedictorian in 2011, had a picture on the school bulletin board, and newspaper clippings were kept in my mother's drawer. On Sundays, when my father made a point of saluting any soldier who showed up at the base club, he would tell her stories. My daughter, Ava, Lieutenant Hayes, outstanding in tactical strategy. People listened, laughed, asked about her. No one called me. I served soda, collected cups, waited for the clock to strike 10 so I could disappear to my room and put on my training uniform, because at least there no one could call me a disappointment. Sunday lunch was always the same. The table was full, the place was silent at first, and then the conversation turned to some of Ava's accomplishments. When I returned from a mission in Kandahar, Afghanistan, 27 days away, my plate was wrapped up in the microwave. No one asked about the flight back, the smell of the barracks, the voices on the radio telling me not to trust even the Allies. Only my dog, Thor, noticed that I existed. My room became a storage room for tools, my mother's medical books, boxes of Christmas presents that had never been delivered. There wasn't even a single updated photo of me on the shelves. Almost every Christmas, there was a new photo of Ava, in uniform, receiving a medal, and there I was, just in the reflection of the glass. At military school, I failed physics and managed to retake chemistry. My father looked at me without saying anything, just shook his head and wrote the next schedule on the board, review at 6. When I tried to talk about changing majors, I heard, "We don't have time for that." The weeks went by marked by anthem rehearsals, shooting range, nights on guard duty that seemed to last 50 hours. No one knew where I was. When I got back, the gate key would get stuck. My uniform would get stiff with dust. The smell of the base would stick to my skin. Only my grandmother would call to ask if I was eating properly. Ava learned to smile for the cameras, to practice a canned response for a local radio reporter. She earned a commendation from a general and was named to the West Point Honor Roll. At home, I would turn my face toward the picture frame, one of which had a photo of the women's track team from 2006. My face was almost hidden in the frame, cut off by the edge. At dinner parties, my sister would introduce herself to visitors with that rehearsed line, "This is Morgan, ex-military, now working in administration." I would look at the floor, wanting to say that that wasn't all. But what could I say? They only heard what reinforced the Hayes family's perfect script. To them, I was the one who didn't make it, the one who always fell behind. At each graduation, Ava would parade around in a new dress and a new story to tell. My father would raise his glass to toast and say, "May everyone follow Ava's example." One time I found an old report card of mine, tucked away in the back of my closet. I had an A in English, a S in math, a C in physics, and a note, "Good, but you can do better." That was it. I never did better. My mother would congratulate me with that phrase. Not everyone is born to be exceptional. Over time, I learned that in a military household, silence is not peace. It's just confirmation that you don't exist. I never fought. I never asked for recognition. I just wanted to be seen. I was forgotten at birthday parties. I didn't have my picture on my diploma. I received a last-minute invitation to Ava's promotions. I lay down so many nights listening to the sound of the bass in the distance, waiting for someone to come into the room just to ask how my day had been. It never happened. But that night, everything would change in a way no one could have imagined. On that freezing morning of January 28, 2024, I woke up before my alarm clock, the sun still hidden behind the clouds, and it felt like the air had stopped in time. Ava's promotion was the big event of the month for the Hayes. They made sure to let the whole family know. Uncle John drove 5 hours to be there. My cousins sat in a row, all in dark suits, medals pinned to their lapels as if they were showing off their achievements. The base's event hall was spacious, with a polished floor and the smell of reheated coffee and cheap perfume, mixed with the smell of uniforms washed with bleach. The seats were reserved for the family in the front row, but I preferred to stay in the back, hiding behind a pillar, playing with my cell phone just to look busy. The ceremony began at exactly 9 o'clock. The master of ceremonies announced the names of each promoted officer. The band played anthems so loudly that I could feel the bass vibrating in my ribs. I watched from afar, trying to avoid eye contact, just waiting for the end. Ava walked down the center aisle, her uniform impeccable, her posture as if she had practiced that parade of steps for weeks. She accepted the greetings, made the standard gesture, smiled for the cameras, waved to her parents, everything just the way they always made it seem perfect. My father stood straight, looking proud as if he had finally achieved what he wanted in life. My mother fixed her hair, blinked quickly to hold back tears, perhaps trying to control her expression for the photo. I knew it would be just another ceremony with my name off the script, another morning where I would be a spectator. Until everything went off script. General Victor Stanton, recently transferred from the Joint Forces Command, walked down the hall, ignored the rows of officers, and stopped next to me. The entire room continued for a second, chatting normally, until he stopped and looked directly at me. Silence was immediate. Everyone turned their heads at the same time. He asked without hesitation, "Ma'am, are you the general?" The echo of the question hung in the air. The sound of silverware and chairs disappeared. Only the rustle of clothes and the squeak of his shoes on the polished floor. I didn't know how to respond, nor did I need to. My mother let the glass slip from her hand. It hit the edge of the table and fell, splashing water everywhere. My father lowered his head and stared at the floor, as if he wished that moment wouldn't exist. Ava went white, her hand clenched tightly around the envelope of the promotion, the smile gone from her face. The general continued to stare at me, waiting for an answer that no one in my family wanted to hear. For the first time, everyone was looking at me. Not because of Ava, not because of some failure or blunder. They were looking because, finally, someone knew who I really was. Conversations stopped, cell phones were put down, even the photographer at the ceremony forgot to press the camera button. My name, which had never been mentioned in public, was now the center of everything. The world seemed to spin slowly. Words took a long time to reach me. I could hear my breathing, the sound of my boots lightly tapping on the floor, the smell of the general's starched uniform mixed with the strong smell of deodorant in the crowded room. It was as if no one knew what to do anymore. Time froze for a few seconds. My entire family stood still, past and present colliding in an event hall illuminated by cold light. I realized that the secret that had haunted me for so many years was about to explode right there, in front of everyone. At that moment, I understood that the truth was going to get out of control, no matter what I said. I thought the exclusion would hurt, but being under all those eyes was a new weight. And at that moment, I still had no idea how big the storm was about to fall upon our family. Looking back, it seems strange to think that so much was hidden for so many years. No one in my family knew. No childhood friends, not even Ava, who slept in the room next to mine for almost 20 years. The only thing that was recorded in the Academy's transcript was what was convenient. Voluntary withdrawal on May 27, 2012. But no one saw what came next. On the same day that everyone thought I had dropped everything, I received a call from a restricted number with no identification. I talked for 10 minutes with a colonel I had never met, but who knew everything about me. I was taken to a base off the map in Maryland, where every door had 3 locks, every room was monitored by cameras, and the badge didn't show a name, just a 4-digit code. Program Candelabra. There weren't even any signs on the walls. There, the world worked at a different pace. Night training, rescue simulations, interrogations with CIA agents. The food was unbranded, served on a steel tray, always at 7 o'clock, without a minute's delay. The sound of the radio filled the hallways. The conversations were always in low tones. No one asked personal questions. It was as if the past had been erased the moment I walked through the base gate. I exchanged my traditional West Point uniform for a black jumpsuit, special boots, a helmet with a night visor, and a radio strapped to my chest. On my badge, only the code, 8492. The first mission came quickly, less than 3 months after arriving. Syria. On September 17, 2013, I was sent to intercept a convoy on the other side of the border, in Aleppo. The objective was clear: identify an undercover contact who was selling information about American agents to local militias. I was 25 years old, a little over 60 kilos, but I was the first one to get into the armored car. The sun had not yet risen. The city seemed like a maze of shadows. The commands were given by encrypted radio. No one called anyone by name. The suffocating heat under the vest, the smell of burning diesel, and the constant fear of making a wrong move. Just remembering it, I can smell the smoke and the sweat running down the back of my jumpsuit. No photos, no records, nothing to prove I was there. Mission accomplished in less than 50 minutes, with no civilian casualties. I returned to base before noon, ate lunch in silence. The commander just looked at me and nodded. That was enough. After Syria came Libya. April 10, 2015. A mission to neutralize an extremist cell leader hiding in Benghazi. A night operation. We went in with 6 agents. 3 came out injured. 1 didn't come back. I had to decide in less than 15 seconds whether to risk everyone's lives or abort. I chose to go in. I faced a narrow corridor, with little light, only the flashlight attached to my rifle and the sound of my own footsteps echoing on the concrete. When the mission was over, each second seemed to have lasted an hour. I got on the plane back with dried blood still on my boots. The strong smell of gunpowder stuck to my hands. I went back to base, and no one asked me anything. It was always like that. I was programmed to pretend that none of it had happened. At home, every Christmas was a test of patience. My grandmother would ask why I never took a vacation. My father would complain about my lack of persistence, and Ava would joke about my new job. I would just smile and come up with short answers, like someone who works in an office and doesn't want to talk about their annoying boss. Deep down, every time someone called me a failure, it became another brick in the wall I built to protect myself. In the first year, I thought I could carry this secret without it affecting me. In the second, I started to feel the weight on my shoulders. In the third, the loneliness was stronger than any military discipline. All I wanted was some minimal recognition, even if it was just a look of respect, a sincere congratulations. But I knew that wasn't coming. The silence was becoming a prison. I remember one night, August 6, 2019, at the base, waiting for a new mission protocol. The commander arrived, placed a manila envelope on the table, and simply said, "You are the kind of agent who doesn't show up in the photos. But without you, the victories wouldn't happen." I left there feeling that maybe, in some way, this was recognition, but it was a bittersweet reward. It would never be enough for the Hazes. With each operation, each secret, the pressure increased. I was trained to never let a single detail slip, even when it seemed impossible to keep it all to myself. I started writing little codes on notebook paper, just to keep from going crazy, but I would destroy everything before returning home. The paranoia became routine. I would check the car before leaving, check messages 2 or 3 times before responding. At the base, any mistake could cost lives. At home, any slip-up was cause for contempt. The worst part was that the wall of silence didn't really protect me. The more time passed, the more distant people became ghosts inside the house. My father never asked me anything beyond the basics. My mother talked about medical cases, new recipes, but never about what I did. Ava was the queen of the stage, of stories, of promotions. What no one saw was that I lived two lives. One in the dark, between codes, missions, and risk of death, and another in the dining room, pretending that my greatest achievement had been surviving the boredom of an office. It was lonely, suffocating, but to avoid disappointment, I kept going like that, until the day the truth no longer fit into the secret. And what came next? No one could have predicted. For weeks, that email kept bouncing around in my head. It wasn't just a message, it was almost a sentence. I read and reread every line, trying to find some clue in the vocabulary, the times, the details of the operation. The sender used terms that no one on the outside would understand, names of cities that were only in confidential reports, exact dates of nighttime raids that never made it to the press. What scared me most was realizing that I barely remembered these details myself, but someone inside my house did. Someone saw it. Someone saved it all, waiting for the right moment to attack me. I stayed up nights, sifting through all the old conversations, looking at Ava's face at breakfast, trying to figure out if she was capable of such cruelty. Every smile she gave, every caustic comment took on new weight. This was no longer just a sisterly nagging, it was actual sabotage. At first, I thought it was something from outside, maybe some envious colleague, some old enemy trying to harm me. I even suspected the people at the base, a sergeant who never liked me, an officer who lost his promotion because of me. What I didn't want to accept was that the betrayal could come from the room next door, from the person who shared the same roof, the same Christmases, the same silly fights over the remote control. I only realized the size of the abyss when Ava appeared at the door of my room in the early hours of the morning, her eyes red, her face swollen from crying so much. She closed the door slowly and stood there, not daring to say anything. The silence was as heavy as the worst of storms. Ava sat on the edge of the bed, rolling up the sleeves of her pajamas, her gaze lost. The first thing she said was almost a whisper. I didn't know it would go so wrong. Her voice was shaking. It wasn't acting. I stayed silent, waiting. She continued, I wanted to be the only one who shined here. You should have never come back. I was always the perfect daughter, but no one talked about me when you were around. Even when you disappeared, you were the one everyone wanted to know where you were. Each word fell like a stone. She confessed to having accessed our father's old laptop, where the files of my old reports were stored in a password-protected folder. She said she never had the courage to open everything, but only enough to put together the text of the anonymous email. I just wanted you to give up, to leave this space for me. I wanted to see you leave here for good. I listened to everything without interrupting. I didn't know if I felt anger, pity, or just a strange emptiness. I stared at the wall, trying to find some reaction that didn't come from years of military training. Inside, I was destroyed, but on the outside, I kept my face impassive. It wasn't just envy. It was the feeling of having been invisible for so long that even the closest person got used to the idea that I wasn't missed. Ava cried softly, as if the guilt weighed as much as the fear. She apologized, but she couldn't explain what she would do differently if she had another chance. That hurt more than any mission in the desert. The feeling of betrayal was mixed with the certainty that, deep down, my presence had always been uncomfortable for everyone there. I spent the rest of the night awake, listening to the silence in the hallway, thinking about all the little humiliations, all the times my name was left off the list, all the whispered conversations behind the door. It was as if that confession had exposed what I had always known. No matter what I did, it would never be enough to be loved in the same way. In the morning, Ava was no longer home. My father left early for the barracks. My mother went to work. No one noticed my different look. I sat on the couch, cold coffee in hand, trying to decide what to do. I couldn't pretend nothing had happened. From that moment on, I either faced my family or became just another ghost in that place. It was in this climate of silent war that the next blow came even stronger. I didn't even have time to digest what Ava had done, and a new email arrived, this time for the high command. Now the accusation was even more serious. Top secret data had been leaked. Documents from Operation Dagger had been exposed on the dark web, all linked to my name and the device in our home. The text was signed by someone using a pseudonym, but the evidence was so precise that it seemed impossible to refute. The fear of losing everything took over. Then I understood that the worst was yet to come. In less than 24 hours, my name was on all internal Army channels, circulating as a suspect in a crime I had never even considered committing. The leaked file was a bombshell. Details of the most sensitive operations of the Candelabra program, lists of informants, dates of infiltration, extraction routes. Everything was meticulously organized, as if someone had had free access to the reports. When they called me from the intelligence sector, Major Collins's voice was curt. "Morgan, your access is suspended until further notice. I need your personal device, now." I handed over my cell phone, my notebook, even my old external hard drive. I spent that night awake, in my uniform, waiting for any call that could pull me out of that abyss. Deep down, I knew it wasn't a system error. Derek Morton never forgot the day I was picked for the Syria operation in 2017, while he was in the technical reserves, doing office work. He was the kind of guy who held a grudge even against shadows. For months, we shared quarters in the desert, taking turns keeping watch and writing encrypted reports. He was efficient, but he had an unhealthy sense of competition, always trying to prove that he deserved more, that other people's merits were just luck. When I came back from Libya and got a small mention of merit, he didn't greet me. He just looked at me from afar, with that half-smile of someone who expects the worst. The virus that blew everything up was sophisticated. It wasn't just a simple Trojan, like the kind that steals bank passwords. It was a remote access malware, planted in 2017, in a fake update routine that no one noticed. It was activated when Ava unknowingly accessed a password-protected report from Operation Dagger using our father's laptop, the same device Derek used on his old missions. Within hours, all the sensitive files were automatically copied to a hidden folder and then sent directly to a server outside the country. I found out about this thanks to a friend in the cryptography industry, Julian, who traced the server's IP to a suspicious address in Prague. There was no coincidence. I knew I had only one chance to clear my name, find Derek and get a confession out of him, whatever that took. I caught the first flight to Washington on March 22, 2024. Every second of waiting felt like an extra weight on my shoulders. I slept little, thinking about all the times Derek had made fun of my choices, the missions I had narrowly escaped, the reports he had tried to review without authorization. I arrived at the Fort McNair base, introduced myself to Captain Williams, and asked for access to the entry logs. I had to convince a former security guard, Sergeant Miller, with whom I had spent many late nights on duty. "You know I would never do that. I need to see who entered the communications room after February." He didn't hesitate. He let me through. In the digital dossier, each login was a maze. And there, at 3 a.m. on February 9th, was Derek's name. 2 logins, 15 minutes each. It wasn't routine. It was sabotage. I photographed everything, saved it to the cloud, and sent it directly to General Stanton, along with the message. "The missing piece is here. It wasn't me." The general, cold as ever, replied in a low voice, "Finish the job, Morgan, but do it all within the law." The hunt began there. With Julian's help, I traced Derek's credit card to a cheap hotel in Arlington. I gave the address to Captain Williams, who called in the counterintelligence team. By late afternoon, armed men were surrounding the building. I went along, even without permission, because I needed to look Derek in the eye and tell him that he would never again be fueled by my fear. I waited behind a thin wall, listening to the muffled voices of the agents. When the door opened, Derek was huddled in the corner, typing frantically on his laptop, trying to cover his tracks. I walked over. He looked at me as if he'd seen a ghost. He didn't say anything right away. He just put down his laptop, sighed loudly, and muttered, "You always knew where to look." That wasn't a victory. It was the least I could do to save my life. The team of experts gathered evidence. General Stanton arrived in less than half an hour, checked every printout, every transfer, every access. The final report was printed in 37 pages and delivered in a sealed envelope to the Central Command. I was exhausted, but not satisfied. I knew that even with Derek detained, the scars of that betrayal would remain there, stuck in every corner of my story. What no one expected was that that night would bring the most difficult moment yet. facing my own family and deciding if I still wanted that surname. Our living room had practically become an electronic warfare center. My father, who had always been used to giving orders in the field, now had to deal with spreadsheets, digital tracking, and a flow of information that he had never controlled. My mother, who was used to dealing with pressure in the military infirmary, spent nights reviewing notes, old physical files, and forgotten prescriptions among confidential papers. Ava, who until then had been all pride and poise, was forced to stare at a laptop screen, reviewing everything she remembered from that day when, without realizing it, she had opened the door to chaos. I coordinated everything, reviewed every line of the log, every remote access, every strange name that appeared on the list. It was 17 days of intense investigation. The clock on the wall showed absurd times: 2 in the morning, 4:30, 7:10. Coffee was always on. At times, I no longer knew if I was tired or just numb. My father, always methodical, made a point of reconstructing the entire timeline of the accesses: dates, times, each name, each click. It was he who noticed the connection between a seemingly harmless login from 2017 and the moment when Ava, already promoted, used the old laptop from the barracks to access confidential reports, without knowing that Derek's malware was planted there. The truth stung. The archived logs left no doubt. It had all started with that careless login. My father, for the first time, hesitated before speaking. "I should have changed all the passwords," he muttered quietly, staring at the screen. My mother clutched her notes like a shield. Even Ava, usually full of apologies, admitted that her mistake had been the trigger. Each confession was laced with embarrassment, but also with relief. It wasn't just about me anymore. It was about the whole family trying to put out the fire they'd helped start. With access granted by General Stanton, I began to coordinate directly with the Army IT team. We analyzed lines and lines of code, tracked IPs, and checked logs of entry into military bases in 4 different states. With each detail uncovered, the web of sabotage became clearer and closer to home. No one wanted to admit it, but everyone had to face it. The threat had come in through the front door. It wasn't just the external enemy. It was the sum total of errors, vanities, silences, and omissions that had been accumulating for years, until it exploded right there, in the middle of the room. Between tight deadlines and sleepless nights, General Stanton demanded results. "I need this report by Monday, without a doubt." Hearing this from him was like feeling a 1,000-kilo weight on my back, but it also gave me the strength to keep going. I couldn't fail. I knew this was my only chance to clear my name, and to show that, despite everything, I hadn't given up on my family. With each line of command discovered, with each cross-referenced record, a mixture of anger, pride, and an almost physical urgency grew not to let the story end there. It was on the 16th day, at 3:27 in the morning, that we found the definitive connection, a non-standard data transfer triggered by my father's old laptop. The file was encrypted, but Julian, the cryptography friend, deciphered it in less than an hour. The proof was there. It had all started at home, but it wouldn't end there. I knew the next step would be even harder, facing public exposure and deciding whether the truth would now finally set our family free or destroy it once and for all. When the case was finally presented to the command, there was no turning back. The mood in the auditorium was tense, everyone in uniform, their eyes looking straight ahead, but the tension was palpable in the air. Derek Morton was handcuffed in front of everyone, his expression blank, not daring to look up. The news spread quickly through the barracks. The dossier was false. The sabotage began within the Hayes family itself. No one joked. No one smiled. Just silence and some whispers in the background. Ava stood before the panel, her face pale, her hands clasped so tightly that the white of her knuckles was visible. General Stanton, in that voice that brooks no argument, asked her to tell him what she had done. She looked at me, took a deep breath, and told me everything. She told me about the email, the access to the computer, the virus she had let in without realizing it, her fear of losing the shine she had always had. She didn't make dramatic apologies. She didn't cry in public. She simply admitted, word for word, the truth. After that, Stanton read the official warning, declared that her name would be recorded there forever, but also that it was time to start over. He finished with a look that mixed respect and disappointment. The general then turned to me and said, "Morgan, the floor is yours." I hadn't planned a speech. I went up on stage, grabbed the microphone, and looked straight at everyone. I talked about things no one likes to talk about. The silence of those who return from a mission with no one to ask if everything is okay. About decisions that hurt more than bullets. About the difference between having a family and being truly seen as part of it. I told him about a mission in Syria, where I had to choose between risking my soldiers and saving a group of children. And when I chose the children, I was called weak by my own colleagues. I said that being invisible didn't make me stronger. It just forced me to fight harder for every space. I said that courage sometimes is just standing when you want to disappear. As I spoke, I saw my father looking down, holding back tears. When I finished, he stood up, hugged me in front of everyone, and apologized publicly for the first time. "I never really saw what you did. Forgive me." My mother, always reserved, approached me silently. She handed me an envelope. Inside was a confidential report full of notes, dates, and her comments on every mission I had been on. "I never stopped following what you did, Morgan. I just didn't know how to tell you I was proud." The room fell silent again. Ava, after the shock, came closer and whispered in my ear, "I want to learn from you." For the first time, I didn't feel competition, just tiredness and an almost strange relief. My name, which had always seemed like a burden, suddenly became a point of reference. People who had never spoken to me came to shake my hand, thank me for what I had told them, ask for advice. I had never liked applause, but that night, the applause was different. Not for a military feat, but for exposing what everyone there felt but pretended not to see. At the dinner that followed, my father insisted on taking a new family photo. Only this time, he didn't want anyone to be left out. On the table, a cake with my name spelled out correctly, without any cuts or nicknames. I hadn't erased the years of silence, but for the first time, I felt like I belonged there. But none of that could erase what had come before. The weight of invisibility had lightened, but the marks hadn't gone away, and I knew the real test was yet to come. Ava started attending my classes at the Quantico Military Training Center the following semester. It was strange to see her sitting in the third row, with a new notebook and a spotless uniform, trying to maintain her posture but looking away every time I walked through the halls. At first, the rest of the class whispered, thinking I would treat my own sister differently, but I made sure to make everything clear. There, no one had last names, only responsibilities. During the first exercise, she messed up a basic evacuation protocol, was called to the front, and received the same direct feedback that any other student would receive. After class, Ava came up to me. "Thank you for not sparing me. I need this, more than you know." My father, who had previously been a distant figure, started calling almost every week, sometimes just to ask about the weather, other times to ask questions about a decision made by the battalion commander. He never said it outright, but each call was a silent apology. Even my mother changed. She sent short messages. "I saw your name in the report. Congratulations." Or, "Take care, daughter. I saw that the operation in Baghdad got complicated again." Things I had never heard before February 24th of that year. At first, I found it strange. It seemed forced, but over time I realized that it was their way of saying they were trying. At family gatherings, the photos finally changed places. Before, I was the cut-off corner of the images, the empty space between relatives. Now, not only did I appear in the photos, but my mother made sure to put me in the center. At my last birthday party, the room was full. Generals, old colleagues, childhood friends, all mixed in with the family. The cake was simple, but on the icing it was written clearly, without abbreviations, without irony. General, sister, teacher. For the first time, no one made jokes. No one looked away. I received a hug from Ava, sincere, unlike anything I had ever felt before. She said to me quietly, "Thank you for not giving up on us. You were never invisible to me. I just didn't know how to show it." At the base, my colleagues began to see me in a different light. The commander asked me to participate in the Strategic Decision-Making Council. New officers sought me out for advice on careers, difficult choices, and how to deal with failure. Some would say, if you could handle what you went through, then so can I. The feeling of belonging came slowly, never by decree. I had to fight for every inch of respect. The truth is that no one gives you acceptance, especially when the label of failure is already stuck on your forehead. But each little recognition, a phone call, an invitation, a restrained compliment, rebuilt something inside me. At home, the atmosphere changed. My father started listening when I spoke. My mother started asking for help in the kitchen, something she had never done before. Ava, who was always very confident, now consulted me about everything: projects, questions, even friends. Sometimes I still felt like I could disappear again, that all it took was one mistake to be forgotten. But I learned not to live waiting for approval. Belonging, I discovered, is much more about not giving up who you are, even when no one recognizes your worth. At the end of that summer, on a normal evening, I received a message from General Stanton. "Morgan, we need to talk about the next mission." At that very moment, my father appeared in the living room, took one of my old photos, and placed it next to his medals. "Here, daughter. Finally the right way." There, with my family gathered around the table, I understood that not all recognition needs an audience. What matters in the end is knowing that resisting silence, contempt, envy, that's what builds who you really are. And no matter how much time tries to erase what we've experienced, nothing can erase the belonging we've earned through hard work. What was left, this time, was respect. And for the first time, I wanted to stay for the next photo. But at that moment, I already knew. Some scars stay forever. The weight of what was left behind never disappears completely. It just changes place. And it is this weight that reminds me, every day, why it was worth not giving up. When I look back, I don't see heroism. I see the sum total of all the days I refused to disappear, even when every silence from my family seemed like a sentence. Today, the weight of invisibility has become a memory, not a sentence. I learned the hard way that belonging is not about fitting into other people's expectations, but about taking up space even when no one makes way. And in this conquered space, where respect was finally pulled from the shadows, one certainty remained. Those who survive their own exclusion discover a strength that no one can take away. And now I want to know, when was the moment when you felt ignored by those who should see you the most? Write in the comments the phrase that sums up your feeling. Share your truth. Don't let it disappear with you. You are already part of this story because you felt the impact of these words on your skin. Stories like this unite those who thought about giving up but stayed. Each story here transforms the listener, and you already know, belonging to a community like this means no longer hiding. Leave your like now. This shows that real stories need to be remembered, discussed, shared. Subscribe and turn on notifications. Here, each video brings you face to face with real human limits. There is no room for indifference where lives change in each episode. Now get ready. The next video is already on the screen, and what you're about to see challenges everything you think you know about survival, about family, about how far someone will go to keep their voice alive. Click now and continue, because leaving here before seeing what comes next simply doesn't make sense.